I bet you all knew that this month, April, is Earth Week month. And in celebration of that, we are honored to have Beth Shenai from one of the state agencies called
Oregon Department of Agriculture.
You've heard of them, agriculture. And we're going to do a little extra culture mixed in. We're going to talk a little bit about Earth Week and the environment and what we could do on an individual basis to make the planet just a little bit greener and a little bit more livable. So welcome aboard.
Thanks, Lee. Good to be here.
I'm going to ask, when you were a little girl or a teenager, what was your relationship with the environment? What did you do? How did you perceive it?
I was an outdoorsy kind of kid, and my whole family was that way.
Right.
So I was, at an early age, camping, backpacking, canoeing with my family. And so just had a real comfort with the outdoors, and probably led to my career in an environment later, because it was a comfortable place, but I also wanted to make sure it stayed beautiful and was able to be enjoyed by future generations too.
Right. Did you have any special fascination with the sciences in middle school or high school?
Oh, yeah. Actually, my formative time of deciding where I was going to head off was in high school. We did a week-long marine biology trip as part of an upper-level biology class. So we the instructor took the whole class down to the southern Oregon coast, and we studied dune ecology and the marine life that lives in the wooden docks in Coos Bay.
Wow.
And it was fascinating. And I just wanted more and more, especially I was really interested in the marine biology part at one point. So that kind of launched me.
Tell us some of the thoughts you had, some of the memories you have of what you learned in the early stages of marine biology, because I'm sure a lot of people out there don't really know that much in depth.
Right. Well, we learned a lot about how the energy of the ocean carves what the coast looks like, how headlands focus in energy and kind of coves diffuse it out so you get more sand falling out in those areas. So about those processes were really interesting to me. But then also just categorizing the different marine animals, and I especially was interested in the invertebrates, going tide pooling, which I'm sure many people have done, or at least seen a starfish in a tide pool or a sea anemone in a tide pool. And so I could just stay in a good tide pool for hours and hours, at least until the tide came back in.
It's ironic you say that, because just 2 days ago, I made a trip down to Newport, to my favorite aquarium out there, and I love seeing the squids and the cuttlefish and the starfish that you can lift out of the tank and all. And I have a little joke that I was going to have a peanut butter and jellyfish sandwich, but not really. But anyway, jellyfish are very fascinating because they're very different than any other creatures that I know of.
Yeah, they're
on Earth.
very primitive but very elegant.
It looks like a floating mushroom almost.
Yeah.
And all. So, do you have a favorite marine animal? What kind of invertebrate are you into, as they used to say?
I know I did at one point. I think I really liked finding chitons and limpets. They're the little ones that just stick on the rocks. And if you didn't know what you were looking for, they would just probably look like a rock. So it was always fun to find those. But I think the Pycnopodia starfish, which is called a sunflower starfish, was probably my most exciting find, because it's a very big one, and it has many more legs than the regular 5-legged starfish that we see. You have to get into tide pools that aren't exposed as often to find some of the more interesting stuff. So when you get to one of those super low tides, and you can get way out where you might not.
Is there Walport or Reesport?
The best tide pools I've been to on the Oregon coast are at Yaquina Head. The outstanding natural area. It's managed by the BLM, I believe, but
it's free to go in there and check it out.
Yep. There's designated
There's something for you to
tide
do on your weekends.
Yeah.
When it's not raining too heavily, of course. Hardly ever rains in this state.
Yeah.
And all. So tell us a story about how you got involved in professionally entering the environmental
Sure,
sciences?
yeah, it really is a long path that started back when I was a kid, and then on into deciding to go into college to study an environmental field. I was both fascinated with marine biology, physical oceanography, and environmental science at first, but then, you know, life and your other choices kind of decide where exactly you're going to go. So I ended up, after some time away from the Pacific Northwest, moving back here and deciding to become an AmeriCorps volunteer. As a way to kind of get myself back, get ready to go back to school, finish my degree, get some money for it, and work in an environmental field. So I was on an environmental field team with AmeriCorps for a year.
Yeah, tell us, where were you stationed?
My program was out of the Portland area. It was called the Northwest Service Academy. So I just commuted from home in Silverton every day up to join my team to go off and do different kind of restoration projects mostly. So I did a lot of invasive plant removal, native plant planting, and a whole lot of in between. We spent some time on a ranch removing some old fencing to open it back up as a natural area. Really anything, and just really got to know a lot of the important organizations in the Portland metro area that are doing environmental restoration and work. So that kind of got me set for going back to Oregon State, where I got my degree in natural resources.
Okay. So Beth, did you have any particular role models or mentors along the way that gave you a little extra pride into the field?
I would just say that there were certain college professors that really inspired me. They were those ones that were true teachers.
At OSU?
Yeah, actually part of my education was at North Seattle Community College. That's where I moved to after high school, into the Seattle area. And so both there and at Oregon State, I had some really good professors. I loved going to Oregon State for an environmental degree because they have whole forests that belong to them. You can, you can do a lot of your work right there off campus, and it was a great place to dive into this topic.
Okay, so tell us now, you're studying it. You didn't know exactly where you'd end up in the food chain of environmentalists, as it were.
It's funny because after AmeriCorps, but before I started back to school, I got to work here for the city of Salem. They had, it was basically a stream cleanup crew. After the -- floods, they got some extra federal funding to make sure that the streams did not have so much non-natural debris in it. But that turned into a question of what kind of ecological condition the streams in Salem were really in, and we started a stream assessment team to really start collecting information on the water quality, the vegetation, the macroinvertebrates, the tiny little insects that live in the stream. And so I got some experience in that, and before I went back to school to get the degree. And then while I was working for the city, there was a story about an invasive plant called kudzu being found in Portland, and they talked about the state weed team flying around in helicopters to look for kudzu to see if there were any more locations. And I thought, I want to be on the state weed team. That sounds like fun. And then I never thought about it again, but guess where I ended up after I graduated and got my first degree in my field? I was there at the Department of Agriculture in the weed team. And I didn't even realize that I had landed right where I had wanted to be until they mentioned that sometimes they go up in helicopters to look for stuff. So, and I've gone up in a helicopter to help.
Is it fun riding a helicopter?
Oh yeah, I like that.
They're pretty safe for the most part.
Yeah.
And all.
So, so it wasn't too long after I graduated from OSU, I got the opportunity.
Let's talk about streams. We'll take into tributary. There are average people out there that constitute our audience. What advice would you give them to, if they live near a stream or even a lake, what do they need to do to be environmentally friendly and do on their end? Yeah,
I think my advice would be not just to those people right next to a stream. I would like everyone to know that they live next to a stream in one way, because every drop of water that hits the ground where you live
starts out in a stream.
It ends up in a stream. Yeah, it ends up in a drainage ditch maybe that will go into a stream, into a river, or maybe go directly into a pond or a lake. So just thinking about keeping that water like you'd want to drink it You don't want to be putting things on the ground that you wouldn't want to end up in your drinking water later. There's no magic process for
Good
cleaning
to the
water.
last drop.
That's right.
Not
So
to make you drop.
be careful with fertilizer applications if you're using pesticides. Make sure that you're really don't over apply anything, fertilizers or pesticides. Make sure that you clean up after your dog, but also find those alternative ways of managing your landscape that are as least impactful as possible.
Is there a way to make a blockade so the pesticides don't go into the stream with rainfall and stuff like that? Or?
Well, there's absorbent material, but if you have anything that's running off of your property into a stream, then you're applying it illegally. So that's the first thing to think about. You need to make sure that you're applying it only at a rate that will be taken up 100% by the plants that you're using it on. So, or any, if you're doing some other insecticide or something in your garden, there shouldn't be a need for a barrier because you're not over applying it. Certainly when there are emergency types of spills, there are ways you can mitigate it with barriers too.
Well, Beth, we're in springtime now. A lot of people are doing gardening, including myself a little bit. And what should we know to have a safe, friendly garden so that we need to poison the bees, which also is a big epidemic
Pollinator
thing.
protection is a big...
Okay, let's talk pollinator protection because that's a real, our whole environmental agricultural thing depends on the pollination of bees and all. So what do we need to do to be more cautious and not commit bee genocide, as it were?
Well, I think, again, making sure that you're using all the right products and that your products that you use in your garden don't mention anything about being unsafe around bees. But organic gardening practices are going to really not only protect bees, but encourage them to come. So I would say one of the best ways to protect pollinators is to increase their numbers and provide habitat for them. And this isn't just the honeybee. Honeybees are the most famous pollinators, but we have a lot of native bees in Oregon that are like mason bees that you can set up little mason bee. They're little holes in a little block of wood. We have ground-dwelling bees that just like to burrow little holes. So looking into what bees need to thrive, and including habitat for bees in your gardening space is probably one of the most important things you can do.
So I'm trying to absorb what you're telling us. I have to look at the ingredients of the pesticide and
or fertilizers.
Or the fertilizer. And then do I ask the store manager or one of the clerks to give it like a security clearance, as it were? Well, I'm thinking, because you want to be secure for the insects that pollinate.
Right.
So, because I may not know all the chemical names and what they imply.
Right.
So
you could, of course, reading the label yourself is the most important thing. You could ask for advice from the garden center. You could ask for advice from master gardeners about what practices are good to keep your garden healthy for bees as well.
Good master. They're on Center Street, I believe.
Yeah, there is the Marion County
just
Extension Office.
Yeah, just east of the Mental Health Hospital.
Yeah.
Okay, I was there a while back and all. Are there any kind of yard or garden-friendly insects that you should encourage besides different bees? What are some healthy things that...
Well, I think ladybugs are probably the most famous. They're great for eating other insects and spiders actually too. Not really? Being afraid of spiders and letting them be and be in their habitat. Well, and then bat boxes are also great for keeping a population of bats in your area. Are wonderful for insect control too.
Very interesting. What are some of the myths out there that people have about gardens and the environment that we have to dispel?
Wow.
Any kind of phony rumors, what they call old wives' tale, that I don't want to take it out on wives.
Yeah, but. I'm not sure I know of any myths about the environment right offhand. I think there used to be a feeling that the environment was really big enough to handle everything that we threw into it in the air and in the water. But I don't really think that's a modern myth anymore. It was back then, that the ocean was too big to pollute, and we have all these kind of self-cleansing processes, but we understand now that they all have their limit, and we can really disrupt those natural processes.
I know every so often you hear about a kind of a bird kill or a crustacean kill washing up on the shore and all, and that's probably due to pollution of the ocean.
It could be, yeah. There's we're just starting to learn of what the impacts of all the plastic pollution in oceans is, because we see large pieces of plastic floating around, and it's obvious to us that that's litter and it shouldn't be there. But what we're learning now is that those pieces of plastic degrade into microscopic pieces of plastic that also get mistaken for food by the lowest of the food chain. So what's going to happen when we disrupt the food chain to that level? That's something that we're all...
So it's kind of slow motion poison for a lot of the
So every kind of cleanup effort and prevention effort, especially to keep those kind of plastics from getting in the ocean and on the landscape.
The next generation in school, are we properly preparing them to be more environmentally conscious?
I think that we're doing our best. I've seen some wonderful teachers out there who put environmental education at the top of their list. They're struggling to balance all of the needs of Common Core type curriculums and make sure that they get environmental education in there. In the noxious weed world, where I currently work, there's been some really great efforts on developing curriculums that can teach about invasive plants and also satisfy the needs, the educational requirements as kids go through. So there's a lot of really creative stuff. And of course, we have the Jane Goodall Environmental Middle School here in Salem, magnet school for students who want to delve deeply into environmental education at a pretty young age.
Where is that located? I don't know. Check in the phone book.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
Okay.
and I know it's one of those that only has so many openings, and I think you have to kind of do a lottery process if you're interested in getting into it. But.
Now, by background, I'm a gerontologist, and there are a lot of baby boomers who are coming up and now be retirees. What advice would you have for the senior citizen community to do? What kind of volunteer things that they could be environmentally useful volunteers to help save the planet for their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to be?
Well, I would just suggest that they check out different organizations like Solve or the Isaac Walton League. There's a lot of great Sierra Club. There's a lot of good local chapters of organizations like that. And they
all have websites?
Yeah. I think if you look up environmental organizations in Salem, you'll probably get a good starting list to look into. And I know that all of those organizations can use everything from help in the office to help, doing work out in the field. So depending on the interest, mobility, whatever, there's always a way that you can use your talents to help support environmental organizations that way as well.
Great. Now you have a cute and daring little girl. She's now 7, Maya.
7, yes.
What have she absorbed about environmental awareness from her 7-year-old point of view? What?
I'd say she probably has our recycling system at home down really well. She also has a love of being outside, and if I'm puttering around in the garden, she's almost always grabbing a watering can and watering the flowers. She wants to make sure what she sees outside is taken care of. And I've intentionally made sure she's coming along with me on backpacking trips, and we slow down and point out what we're seeing just for her to get really fascinated, because I can mandate to her that she needs to protect the environment in these different ways, but what she really needs to do is love it, so that she just wants to do that. And that's the advice I would give to anyone who's working with children. And
I'm going to take a 1 or 2 minute opportunity to share with you something that just percolated in my mind about my environmental past. Back in the 1980s, I was working in a senior center called Rochdale Village in Queens near Kennedy Airport. And there was this huge garbage dump near the junior high school, which we now call middle school. And it was an eyesore and people were complaining, but nobody did anything about it. I saw an advertisement bulletin for a grant, and I decided an environmental grant would be very appropriate. So I wrote up a grant proposal, and we got the cooperation of Cornell University Extension Services. I learned about peat moss manure and chicken wire fencing. You don't learn that in social work school at all. And what we did is we started Operation Green Thumb. We took the garbage dump, we had it cleansed out, and instead we made different kinds of plots for fruits and vegetables. And because I love intergenerational stuff, we assigned one scout, usually a Boy Scout or Girl Scout, and one senior citizen. And the senior citizen would do the watering can, and the scout would do the digging of the soil with the spade and putting the seeds in. So it was a kind of a joint thing. At the end of the season, in harvest time, we harvested our food, and we had a big outdoor picnic to do that, and that was Operation Green Thumb, and that was
Great.
how I got my little white thumb involved in green in Queens, New York, my hometown.
I think that's a great illustration of another way to ensure that kids are environmentally aware is the volunteering. Volunteering yourself and bringing your kids along to do that. And one volunteer opportunity I am remiss that I didn't mention is Master Recycler. It's a great post-retirement way to dive in and really get engaged in your community to help reduce waste.
Address
which is another.
or a phone number?
It's mcrecycles.net. It's the Marion County Environmental Services program that runs that, the Master Recycler class.
mcrecycle.net.
Yep, mcrecycles.net.
And you'll get net results.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about community gardens, because that's a good opportunity to have some around town and all. Are you familiar with any yourself? Community gardens?
I have, not directly. My dad is a retiree. He lives up in Wilsonville, and they have a really thriving community garden program going. And as a retired guy who lives in a one-bedroom condo, he doesn't have a lot of gardening space on his own patio. So he's really gotten engaged in that, and it's been great for him and great for me as a result, because he gives me lots of produce when it's really pumping it out. And I have a little more garden space than he does, but I don't have as much time to garden. So,
what are some of the easier to take care of fruits and veggies to cultivate?
Well, I think for me, I have a raspberry patch, so getting a raspberry patch started just means all I need to do is trim some canes once a year, and I get tons of raspberries. They grow quickly, so that's one of my go-to. I like to plant perennial vegetables and fruits like raspberry plants, strawberry plants, asparagus plants, rhubarb plants. I have all of those in my garden. So for people who don't have a lot of time, putting something in that will just automatically grow each year so you don't have to replant new starts is good. And then I got to have a tomato. Just always have tomatoes.
And then
around.
Master Gardens could help you set the thing. So
absolutely.
check it out. They're on Center Street, as I said, not too far from the State Hospital there. And
they've actually, the main office has moved to Capitol Street for OSU Extension. And so it's at Capitol and Gaines. That's not too hard to...
Yeah, that's near the Farm Bureau.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Yep. Same building.
Oh, okay, because we're going to have the Farm Bureau here. I don't know if you know Anne Marie there. She's the public relations lady. She may go on the show sometime and all. Now, let us know about some of the dangers about flooding, because we sometimes do have flooding from an overdose of rain. And how does that affect our environment?
Well, flooding, probably the biggest threat to the environment is when areas flood that pick up pollutants to the water. And so making sure, again, that you're not leaving things out that might get picked up, in a bottle of chemical or something.
Beware of accidental poisoning.
Yeah.
The toxins are just as strong, whether you intend it or not.
But to help prevent flooding, managing your landscape so that it absorbs water well and doesn't erode as easily, there's a lot of good prevention you can do to make sure that the landscape can absorb water more than just flushing it all off. Some of the big floods we've had, you're not going to avoid that completely. But
any advice on particular soil to get to make your place
pretty
more-
much, my soils professor at OSU said, you know, if you get stuck on any question in my class, add organic matter will always get you some points. So any extra organic matter you can add to your soil, because it'll make sandy soil hold more moisture, grow more root material in your plants, and it'll break up clay stuff. And it's very absorbent for moisture. It's going to help prevent erosion. It's the answer to a lot of problems with your soil. So get out the compost, get out the manure,
Okay.
work more into your soil. That's
Good.
always a good...
And finally, let's touch on that evil demon called invasive species. What are some of the
little bit.
invasive species we should watch out for and discourage and do a lobotomy of the invasive species?
Well, I'd say, since we've kind of been touching on gardeners a lot, people who garden should just be aware that there are some ornamental plants. If you've got an ornamental plant that's growing really well, or a friend has one that's just dividing and going crazy, and you think, oh, I should put that in my garden because it grows easy, it multiplies quickly, double check that it's not on the state noxious weed list, and you can find that.
Is juniper
No, juniper is a native plant, but
okay,
the way we manage our landscapes in Eastern Oregon has caused it to grow because we suppressed fire for so long that juniper expanded beyond its natural extent, or it wasn't suppressed by fire as much. But juniper over here on the west side, no, it's not a noxious weed.
That's good to know.
You're fine with that.
Insurance.
Probably the ones to keep an eye out here that I've seen people sharing, there's one called policeman's helmet. There is purple loosestrife, another bright, pretty flower. That'd be another one to make sure you weren't sharing. I've seen some ribbon
Hope you're all
grass.
taking notes.
Ribbon grass. But
Wisdom from Beth.
ones to keep your eye out for that aren't here but could get here easily are garlic mustard and giant hogweed. Those would be the two that we don't have yet, and we're trying to keep out of Marion County anyway.
Okay. We have a little over a minute left. I want to close with your advice to people who are aspiring to follow in your footsteps and become environmentalists for the next generation. What should they be doing along the pathway to get there?
Well, the two things...
Speak them to the camera there. Let them know.
You should be getting an education in an environmental field, and then volunteering. Get connected with groups as much as you can so that you're a known entity and you're gaining experience, and just keep at it. And keep just enjoying the environment so that you're out there self-educating. Go on hikes with wildflower books and get to know what's around you. And don't give up. There's a place for everybody there.
Good. Okay. On that note, I'm going to say you don't have to be Kermit the Frog to think green.
That's very true.
And chlorophyll and photosynthesis will help you along. And if you have any questions, write them into, you want to give your email?
Yeah, sure. If anyone, especially if you've got invasive plant issues, my email is S, as in Sarah, which is my secret first name. It's smyers@oda.state.or.us.
That should do it. Thank you. Have an environmentally friendly spring and summer. Bye for now.
Thanks, Lee.